didn't expect to see you here. Why don't you come in and sit down and join me for a story? I was getting ready to start one. If you want to listen. Have you heard the story by Mark Twain called The Notorious Jumping Frog from Calaverous County? You haven't? You should join me then. It's a pretty good story. I'll read it to you. In compliance with the request of a friend of mine who wrote me from the East, I called on good-natured, garrulous old Simon Wheeler and inquired after my friend's friend, Leonidas W. Smiley, as requested to do, and I hereunto append the result. I have a lurking suspicion that Leonidas W. Smiley is a myth, that my friend never knew such a personage, and that he only conjectured that if I asked old Wheeler about him, it would remind him of his infamous Jim Smiley, and he would go to work and bore me to death with some exasperating reminiscence of him as long and as tedious as it should be useless to me. If that was a design, it succeeded. I found Simon Wheeler dozing comfortably by the barroom stove of the dilapidated tavern in a decayed mining camp of angels, and I noticed that he was fat and bald-headed and had an expression of winning gentleness and simplicity upon his tranquil countenance. He roused up and gave me a good day. I told him that a friend of mine had commissioned me to make some inquiries about a cherished companion of his boyhood named Leonidas W. Smiley, Reverend Leonidas W. Smiley, a young minister of the gospel, who he had heard was at one time a resident of Angel's Camp. I added that if Mr. Wheeler could tell me anything about this Reverend Leonidas W. Smiley, I would feel under many obligations to him. Simon Wheeler backed me into a corner and blockaded me there with his chair, and then sat down and reeled off a monotonous narrative which follows this paragraph. He never smiled, he never frowned, he never changed his voice from the gentle flowing key to which he tuned his initial sentence. He never betrayed the slightest suspicion of enthusiasm. But all through the interminable narrative there ran a vein of impressive earnestness and sincerity, which showed me plainly that, so far from his imagining that there was anything ridiculous or funny about his story, he regarded it as a really important matter, and admired its two heroes as men of transcendent genius and finesse. I let him go on his own way, and never interrupted him once. Reverend Leonidas W. Well, there was a feller here once by that name, Jim Smiley, in the winter of 49, or maybe it was spring of 50, I don't recollect exactly. Somehow, though, what makes me think it was one or the other is because I remember the big flume weren't finished when he first come to the camp. But anyway, he was the curiousest man about always betting on anything that turned up you ever see. If he could get anybody to bet on the other side, and if he couldn't, he'd change sides. Anyway, that suited the other man, would suit him. Anyway, just so as he got a bet, he was satisfied. But still he was lucky, uncommon lucky. He most always come out winner. He was always ready and laying for a chance. There couldn't be no solitary thing mentioned, but that feller had offered a bet on it, and take every side you please. So I was just telling you. If there was a horse race, you'd find him flush, or you'd find him busted at the end of it. If there were a dog fight, he'd bet on it. If there was a cat fight, he'd bet on it. If there was a chicken fight, he'd bet on it. Why, if there was two birds sitting on a fence, he'd bet you which would fly first. Or if there was a camp meeting, it would be there regular to bet on Parson Walker, which he judged to be the best exhorter around here. And so he was too, and a good man. If he even see a straddlebug start to go anywheres, he would bet you how long it would take him to get to wherever he was going to. And if you took him up, he would follow that straddlebug to Mexico. But what he would find out where he was bound for and how long he was on the road. Lots of the boys here has seen that Smiling, and he can tell you about him. Well, it never made no difference to him. He'd bet on anything. Dangerous fellow. Parson Walker's wife laid very sick once for a good while, and it seemed as if they weren't going to save her. But one morning he come in and Smiley up and asked him how she was, and he said she was considerable better. Thank the Lord for his infinite mercy. And coming on so smart with that, with the blessing of Providence, she could get well yet. And Smiley, before he thought, says, "Well, I risk 2.5. She don't go anyway." This year, Smiley had a mare. The boys called her 15-minute nag, but that was only in fun, because of course she was faster than that. And he used to win money on that horse. For all she was so slow and always had asthma, or the distemper, or the consumption, or something of that kind. They used to give her 200 or 300 yard start, and then pass her underway. But always at the fag end of the race, she'd get excited and desperate, like, and come cavorting and straddling up and scattering her legs around limber, sometimes in the air and sometimes out to one side among the fences, and kicking up more dust and raising more racket with her coughing and sneezing and blowing her nose, and always fetch up at the stand just about a neck ahead, as near you could cipher it down. And he had a little small bull pup. That too, look at him, you'd think he weren't worth a cent, but to sit around and look ornery and lay for a chance to steal something. But as soon as money was up on him, he was a different dog. His underjaw began to stick out like the forecastle of a steamboat, and his teeth would uncover and shine like furnaces. And a dog might tackle him and bullyrag him and bite him and throw him over his shoulder 2 or 3 times. And Andrew Jackson, which was the name of the pup, Andrew Jackson would never let on but what he was satisfied, and he hadn't expected nothing else. And the bets being doubled and doubled on the other side all the time until the money was all up. Then all of a sudden he would grab the other dog just by the gin of his hind leg and freeze to it. Not chaw, you understand, but only just grip and hang on till they throwed up the sponge, if it was a year. Smiley always came out winner on that pup, till he harnessed a dog once that didn't have no hind legs, because they'd been sawed off in a circular saw. And when the thing had gone along far enough and the money was all up, and he come to make a snatch for his pet Holt, you see in a minute how he'd been imposed on, how the other dog had him in the door, so to speak, and he appeared surprised, and then he looked sort of discouraged like, and didn't try no more to win the fight, so he got shucked out bad. He gave Smiley a look as much as to say his heart was broke, and it was his fault for putting up a dog that had no hind legs for him to take hold of, which was his main dependence in the fight. Then he limped off a piece and laid down and died. He was a good pup, was that Andrew Jackson, and would have made a name for himself if he had lived, for the stuff was in him and he had genius. I know it, because he had no opportunities to speak of, and it don't stand to reason that a dog can't make such a fight as he could under them circumstances if he had no talent. It always makes me feel sorry for when I think of that last fight of his and the way it turned out. Well, this year Smiley had rat terriers and chicken cocks and tomcats and all them kinds of things till you couldn't rest. You couldn't fetch nothing for him to bet on, but he'd match you. He catched a frog one day and took him home and said he called to educate him. And so he never done nothing for 3 months but sat in his backyard and learned that frog to jump. And you bet you he did learn him too. He'd give him a little punch behind, and the next minute you'd see that frog whirling in the air like a donut. See him turn one somersault or maybe a couple, and he got a good start and come down flat-footed and all right like a cat. He got him up so in a matter of catching flies and kept him in practice so constant that he'd nail a fly every time as far as he could see him. Smiley said all a frog wanted was education, and he could do most anything, and I believe him. Well, I've seen him set Daniel Webster down here on this floor. Daniel Webster was the name of the frog. Sing out flies, Daniel flies. And quicker than you could wink, he'd spring straight up and snake a fly off from the counter there and flop down on the floor again as solid as gobbling the mud, and fall scratching the side of his head, and his hind foot as indifferent as if he had no idea he'd been doing any more any other frog might do. You never see a frog so modest and straightforward as he was, for all he was so gifted. When it come to fair and square jumping on a dead level, he could get over more ground at one straddle than any animal of his breed you ever see. Jumping on a dead level was his strong suit, you understand. And when it come to that, Smiley was handing up money on him as long as he had a red. Smiley was monstrous proud of his frog. Well, he might be, for fellers that had traveled and been everywhere, and all said he laid over any frog that ever they see. Well, Smiley kept the beast in a little glass box that he used to fetch him downtown sometimes and lay for a bath. One day a feller, a stranger in the camp he was, come across him with his box and says, "What it might be you got in that box?" And Smiley says, sort of indifferent like, "Might be a parrot or it might be a canary, maybe, but it ain't. It's only just a frog." And the feller took it and looked at it careful and turned it around this way and that. Says, "So it is. Well, what's it good for?" "Well," Smiley says, easy and careless, "he's good for one thing, I should judge. He can outjump any frog in Calaverous County." The feller took the box again and took another long, particular look and gave it back to Smiley and says, very deliberate, "Well," he says, "I don't see no points about that frog that's any better than any other frog." "Maybe you don't," Smiley says. "Maybe you understand frogs and maybe you don't understand them. Maybe you've had experience and maybe you ain't only an amateur, as it were. Anyways, I've got my opinion, and I'll risk $40 that he can outjump any frog in Calaverous County." And the feller studied a minute and then says, kinder sad like, "Well, I'm only a stranger here and I ain't got a frog. But if I had a frog, I'd bet you." And then Smiley says, that's all right. If you'll hold my box a minute, I'll go and get you a frog." And so the feller took a box and put up his $40 along with Smiley's and sat down and wait. So he sat there a good while thinking to himself, and then he got the frog out and prized his mouth open and took a teaspoon and filled him full of quail shot, filled him pretty near up to his chin, sat him on the floor. Smiley, he went to the swamp and slopped him around in the mud for a long time, and finally he catched a frog and fetched him in and gave him to his feller and says, "Now if you're ready, stand alongside of Daniel with his four paws just even with Daniel's, and I'll give the word." Then he says, 1, 2, 3, get. And him and the feller touched up the frog from behind, and the new frog hopped off lively, but Daniel gave a heave and hissed up his shoulders so like a Frenchman that it weren't no use, he couldn't budge. He was planted as solid as a church, and he couldn't no more stir than if he was anchored out. Smiley was a good deal surprised, and he was disgusted too, but he didn't have no idea of what the matter was, of course. The feller took the money and started away, and when he was going out at the door, he sort of jerked his thumb over his shoulder, so at Daniel, and says again very deliberate, "Well," he says, "I don't see no points about that frog that's any better than any other frog." Smiley, he stood scratching his head and looking down at Daniel a long time, and at last he says, "I do wonder what in the nation that frog throwed off for. I wonder if there ain't something the matter with him. He appears to look mighty baggy somehow." And he catched Daniel by the nape of the neck, hefted him, and says, "I'll blame my cats if he don't weigh 5 pounds." And turned him upside down, and he belched out a handful of shot. And then he sees how it was, and he was the maddest man. He set the frog down and took out after that feller, but he never catched him. Here's Simon Wheeler heard his name called from the front yard and got up to see what was wanted. And turning to me as he moved away, he said, "Just sit where you are, stranger, and rest easy. I ain't going to be gone a second." But by your leave, I did not think that a continuation of the history of the enterprising vagabond Jim Smiley would be likely to afford me much information concerning the Reverend Leonidas W. Smiley. And so I started away. At the door I met the sociable Wheeler returning, and he buttonholed me and recommenced, "Well, Mr. Smiley and a yaller one-eyed cow that didn't have no tail, only this short stump like a banana." And however, lacking both time and inclination, I did not wait to hear about the afflicted cow, but took my leave. Oh, you want to hear another one? This one's pretty funny if you want to sit down and spell and listen to it too. It's Speech on the Babies, another one by Mark Twain. His real name is Samuel Clemens. Anyway, at the banquet in Chicago, given by the Army of Tennessee to their first commander, General U.S. Grant, November 1879. The 15th regular toast was the babies, as they comfort us in our sorrows, let us not forget them in our festivities. I like that. We have not all had the good fortune to be ladies. We have not all been generals or poets or statesmen. But when the toast works down to the babies, we stand on common ground. It is a shame that for 1,000 years the world's banquets have utterly ignored the baby as if he didn't amount to anything. If you'll stop and think a minute, if you'll go back 50 or 100 years to your early married life and recontemplate your first baby, you will remember that he amounted to a good deal and even something over. You soldiers all know that when that little fellow arrived at family headquarters, you had to hand in your resignation. He took entire command. You became his lackey, his mere body servant, and you had to stand around too. He was not a commander who made allowances for time, distance, weather, or anything else. You had to execute his order whether it was possible or not, and there was only one form of marching in his manual of tactics, and that was the double quick. He treated you with every sort of insolence and disrespect, and the bravest of you didn't dare to say a word. You could face the death storm at Donelson and Vicksburg and give back blow for blow, but when he clawed your whiskers and pulled your hair and twisted your nose, you had to take it. When the thunders of war were sounding into your ears, you set your faces towards the batteries and advanced with steady tread. But when he turned on the terrors of his war whoop, you advanced in the other direction, and mighty glad of the chance, too. When he called for soothing syrup, did you venture to throw out any side remarks about certain services being unbecoming an officer and a gentleman? No. You got up and got it. When he ordered his pat bottle, and it was not warm, did you talk back? Not you. You went to work and warmed it. You even descended so far in your menial office as to take a suck at that warm insipid stuff yourself to see if it was right. 3 parts water to 1 of milk, a touch of sugar to modify the colic, and a drop of peppermint to kill those hiccups. I can taste that stuff yet. And how many things you learned as you went along. Sentimental young folks still take stock in that beautiful old saying that when the baby smiles in his sleep, it's because the angels are whispering to him. Very pretty, but too thin. Simply wind on the stomach, my friends. If the baby proposed to take a walk at his usual hour, 2 o'clock in the morning, didn't you rise up promptly and remark with a mental addition, which would not improve the Sunday school book much, that was the very thing you were about to propose yourself? Oh, were you under good discipline, and as you went fluttering up and down the room in your undress uniform, you not only prattled undignified baby talk, but even tuned up your martial voices and tried to sing Rockabye Baby in the Treetop, for instance. What a spectacle for an army of the Tennessee, and what an affliction for the neighbors too, for it is not everybody within a mile around that likes military music at 3 in the morning. And when you've been keeping this sort of thing up 2 or 3 hours, and your little velvet head intimidated that nothing suited him like exercise and noise, what did you do? You simply went on until you dropped in the last ditch. The idea that a baby doesn't amount to anything. Why, one baby is just a house in the front yard full by itself. One baby can furnish more business than you and your whole interior department can attend to. He is enterprising, irrepressible, brimful of lawless activities. Do what you please. You can't make him stay on the reservation. Sufficient unto the day is one baby. As long as you are in your right mind, don't you ever pray for twins. Twins amount to a permanent riot. And there ain't any real difference between triplets and an insurrection. Yes, it was high time for a Toastmaster to recognize the importance of the babies. Think what is in store for the present crop. 50 years from now, we shall all be dead, I trust, and then this flag, if it still survives, and let us hope it may, will be floating over a republic numbering 200 million souls, according to the settled laws of our increase. Our present schooner of state will have grown into a political leviathan, a great Eastern. The cradle babies of today will be on deck. Let them be well trained, for we are going to leave a big contract on their hands. Among the 3 or 4 million cradles now rocking in the land are some which this nation would preserve for ages as sacred things if we could know which ones they are. If one of these cradles, the unconscious surrogate of the future, is at this moment teething, think of it, and putting in a world of dead earnest, unarticulated, and perfectly justifiable profanity over it too. In another, the future renowned astronomer is blinking at the shining Milky Way with but a languid interest. Poor little chap. And wondering what has become of that other one they call the wet nurse. In another, the future great historian is lying, and doubtless will continue to lie until his earthly mission's ended. In another, the future president is finding himself with no profounder problem of state than what the mischief has become of his hair so early. And in a mighty array of other cradles, there are now some 60,000 future office seekers getting ready to furnish him occasion to grapple with that same old problem a second time. And in still one more cradle, somewhere under the flag, the future illustrious Commander-in-Chief of the American armies is so little burdened with his approaching grandeurs and responsibilities as to be giving his whole strategic mind at this moment to trying to find out some way to get his big toe into his mouth, an achievement which, meaning no disrespect, the illustrious guest of the evening turned his entire attention to some 56 years ago. And if the child is but a prophecy of the man, there are mighty few who will doubt that he succeeded.